Well, week 5 of the college football season is upon us, and with that, the Heisman Trophy race is heating up. Here's a look at the current odds. Now, things could shift tonight with Cam Ward and Miami playing Virginia Tech. We'll see. But the game of the week that can really shake things up the most is Georgia, Bama, Carson Beck, who is not currently on this list, versus Jalen Milroe. But just how big of a swing could this game have in terms of the Heisman Trophy race? For the answer, we welcome in Sportsline analyst Mackenzie Brooks to the show. Mackenzie.
Well, it depends what kind of style you win in, right? If we see Jalen Milroe do what he has been doing, he could go from this plus 750 to down to plus 420, tied with Cam Ward to have the shortest odds. Now, if he just kind of beats them and it's okay stats or whatever, he'd probably be second to Cam Ward. Still very impactful for him, just not as impactful. You want to flip to the other side, Carson Beck. If he has the quote-unquote stat smackdown on Alabama, you see him go from plus 1,600 to essentially inheriting Jalen Milroe's spot here around plus 750. But if he just kind of wins, he really only goes down to plus 1,000 because he won't really be credited with the win the way Jalen Milroe would have been credited. You can credit a Georgia win to a lot of different things, so it won't be as impactful. So his upside is pretty good, but the downside, if he loses this game and Jackson Dart goes out and puts up numbers against Kentucky, I think Carson Beck could be out of this race. So he has a lot more exterior things going on.
All right, a lot of factors in this. For more, let's dive a little bit deeper into the matchup, but also what both quarterbacks really need to do in order to separate themselves at the top of this race. We turn things over to Jeremy St. Louis.
Yes, thank you very much. And I am not going to give my opinion on it because that's what we got this guy here for. Chip Patterson from the Cover 3 podcast, our college football analyst and writer. Chip, so I'll ask you here, your viewpoint of this big game. I mean, it's the game of the week, game of the season, game of the century, whatever you want to call it. But when you look at this Heisman race, what is the impact for you for these two quarterbacks, depending on what the outcome is?
Well, first let's start with Carson Beck, because now we've got a player whose performance so far does not line up with some of the NFL draft projections. You know, these NFL people that are like, okay, that might be your QB1. That might be the first one off the board. And yet, especially when you look back at the Kentucky game and even the first half against Clemson, you feel like it hasn't come together. But there's an opportunity for Carson Beck to be able to recapture the reason why so many scouts fell in love with him, because coming out of the off week, Carson Beck last season came out on a tear, ripped up Florida, ripped up Missouri, ripped up Mississippi, ripped up Tennessee. I mean, we're talking around 10 yards per attempt, multiple touchdown games, flirting with 300 yards passing in some of those. He has not hit marks like that at all yet this season, and I think that Alabama's pass defense is susceptible to being picked apart by a capable passing attack, and certainly I think Carson Beck is the most capable passer that the Crimson Tide have faced. Now, for Jalen Milroe, it is all about the flash. It is all about the big plays, and that's something Milroe has been doing since last year. In fact, I liked Jalen Milroe coming into the season, remembering the man was 6th in last year's Heisman voting. All the other Heisman winners, all the other Heisman finalists, they're all gone. Sure enough, who's the leading returning vote getter from the last time those 800 some odd ballots were passed out? It's Jalen Milroe, and he wasn't even a superstar, but he gave those flash plays and big moments. So, you know, whether it's 4th and a mile against Auburn in the Iron Bowl, whether it's making plays with his legs against LSU, Jalen Milroe in this big stage opportunity, deep balls and big plays on the ground, that's going to be his path. For Beck, it is going to be about showing that the talent, the raw tools that have him so high on those NFL draft boards, it's about putting it together against a defense with some NFL talent.
And as we were talking about during the break, too, with Mackenzie, it's just how those odds for Milroe have changed. If you got him earlier in the season, you're looking at a nice payday if he ends up winning the Heisman. But Chip, the guy who's at the top of the Heisman odds is the Miami quarterback Cam Ward. He's had 4 games of 300-plus yards. So let me ask you this. They play tonight, so he's going to get to watch that game of the week tomorrow between Milroe and Carson Beck. But if he shows out tonight, does it even have an impact on him being atop the board with that outcome of that Bama-Georgia game?
Not really. I mean, it's only things that you could lose, but I do think that for Cam Ward, you know, like, this isn't a time to buy a Cam Ward Heisman vote. Like, this is not it. But what I have seen suggests that the trajectory has him in New York competing for the Heisman Trophy, because, you know, just to talk about the game here, Miami has not had this kind of playmaking in a very, very long time. And you have to go all the way back to antiquity when Danny Cannell was being recruited recruited to really find the time when Miami had, strong run of quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. And so they were always built up along the offensive line and defensive line, but they were severely lacking in the first 2 years of Mario Cristobal at the quarterback position. What Ward has been able to do is tremendous. And Jeremy, I'll even throw some vibes up here. Shocker, I know, but I think there's some intangibles here. This is a Miami locker room that has needed real leadership. The stories we've heard from the offseason in terms of the ways that he organized his own workouts with the wide receivers, the way that he brings some of that swagger to a game. They've got the cameras catching him, telling the defense where the play is going, and then Miami scores a touchdown anyway. There's just like a confidence that I think is magnetic, and it's something that this Miami team, which has been talented for the last couple of years, they have needed that kind of leader. So throw the vibes, the storylines, the intangibles with what is already a great statistical profile. I'm just loving what Cam Ward has been able to mean for the Miami Hurricanes football program.
And so are Hurricanes fans as they go up against Virginia Tech tonight. A little Friday night football for you. The guy who's second in the odds, Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, he's been throwing darts, Chip. I mean, he's leading the nation in passing yards here. The question I have about him is, are we talking enough about what Jackson Dart has been doing at Ole Miss?
Lane Kiffin had a great comment. I say yes. We are appropriately talking about Jackson Dart because Lane Kiffin had a great comment. He was asked in a press conference, do you think that this early season non-conference schedule prepares you for the SEC schedule? Paraphrasing, but he said, I'm a realist. No, it doesn't. I hope our fall camp prepares us for our SEC schedule. I hope our spring practice prepares us for an SEC schedule because these teams that Ole Miss has been absolutely obliterating are not going to properly prepare them. And that's why this Kentucky game is huge because Kentucky does not have the horses on offense to be able to trade paint and trade touchdowns with the Rebels, but they've got a defense with NFL players, especially along the defensive line. And so what does Jackson Dart look like when he's under some pressure? Because if he continues to deliver the kind of results and production that he has, then we are going to be looking at a final statistical profile that's going to be impossible to ignore because Ole Miss doesn't need to be, in the SEC championship game for Jackson Dart to win the Heisman Trophy because those Heisman Trophy winners that have not necessarily been title contenders, top of mind, we're talking about Johnny Manziel, Robert Griffin III. What did they have in common? Ridiculous stat profiles. Jackson Dart, if he has the Rebels in playoff contention, then if he continues to produce like this, we won't even talk about strength of schedule at the end of the year if the numbers are that gaudy. But right now, a rightly rated, appropriate amount of talking about Jackson Dart because you got to go play some tougher competition.
Passed for over 1,500 yards so far this season, and the first real test coming up against Kentucky. All right, let's talk about Quinn Ewers because his odds have certainly changed. They've fallen. Of course, he's been hurt, missed last week, set to miss possibly this week as they take on Mississippi State in their first SEC conference game. Chip, how many more games can Ewers afford to miss before he's even out of this race?
0. And that is because Texas is off after the Mississippi State game, and then they are back in action in the Red River rivalry on October 12th against Oklahoma. So he could miss this Mississippi State game, and I think he would still have a chance. That's because on October 12th, they play Oklahoma in Dallas, and on October 19th, they get a visit from the Georgia Bulldogs in Austin. I understand why his stock price, why his value on the board has been dropping with this absence, but Heisman voters are very, very fickle, and many of them very casual. And I say that as one who I hope all y'all would know, I don't consider myself any of these things, but if he storms back and he lights up Oklahoma in Red River and then he beats Georgia, the opportunities will still be there. If Texas wins the SEC in its first year of playing in the SEC, which remember, Heisman ballots turned in after the conference championship games, what greater statement would Quinn Ewers have to go with a profile that already included beating Michigan in the Big House? So I think that for Quinn Ewers, his Heisman candidacy really depends on coming back on October 12th against Oklahoma, winning the game, playing well, beating Georgia and playing well, and continuing to keep Texas in the SEC title hunt. That any more games missed beyond Mississippi State, I'm willing to write it off, but there's too many big stages for Quinn Ewers for me to write him off just yet.
Okay, the last guy we want to talk about is a guy whose odds are starting to shorten, and that's, of course, Colorado two-way star Travis Hunter, now sitting at 16-1. They're going to UCF this week, the first time they visited Florida since 2008. But, Chip, I want to ask you, I mean, he's been producing Heisman moments almost every single week so far this season. What more does Travis Hunter have to do to get into that top 3 for consideration?
Okay, step one, he has to continue, which when you think about the snap count seems a little bit superhuman, but it would take something superhuman for him to continue to stand out in this conversation. And that leads me to step 2. It is the most outstanding player in college football. The award is not given to the best player in college football or the most valuable player in college football, because if the Heisman Trophy was the most valuable player award, there is no doubt that Travis Hunter would be much higher on this board and be considered a top candidate. If we're talking about best or most valuable, Travis Hunter's a top 3 player in college football in my book. But to be outstanding, you need to stand out. And in order to stand out, you need to be able to be in the biggest games that everyone is watching. You need to be able to be in contention for your conference title, for the college football playoff. And so for Travis Hunter, you need to be able to stand out, which means Colorado as a team needs to continue to win. I know it doesn't make total sense. Individual awards so closely correlated with team success. But again, when you're on like a 6-7 win team, you're just not standing out all the time on a Saturday. So for Travis Hunter, number 1, continue your superhuman availability and participation, playing on both sides, huge plays on both sides of the football. But number 2, you need some help from your teammates so that Colorado continues to be a part of the conversation as a team deep into the season.
He is college football writer, analyst, and host of the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson, joining us as we discuss Heisman impacts for this coming weekend. And of course, for more of Chip, Tom, Danny Cannell, Bud Elliott, make sure you're checking out the Cover 3 podcast. Thursday's podcast is your Locks podcast, where they give you their picks for the weekend. It's a learn and earn. Scan that QR code to get that latest episode now. Download and follow wherever you get your podcasts.